Hello, and welcome back to the podcast where you are invited for lighthearted conversations about things that matter as you seek to live your most meaningful, beautiful, and joyful life. I'm your host, Dr. Edie Wadsworth, and I hope you enjoy your stay here at the House of Joy.
Okay, hello and happy Thursday. We are here together for another episode of House of Joy.
Welcome to House of Joy!
Yay!
We're actually going to talk a little bit about joy today.
I know, we were just talking about how this podcast is named House of Joy, and I don't think we've actually ever
done an episode
on
that was all about joy.
All about joy.
And this is kind of tangentially about joy, so what are we really talking about?
Tangentially? Is that a word?
Of course it's a word.
Gosh, coming out with a bang. So yeah, today we are, I can't even say that word again because
tangentially
talking about joy through feeling content, feeling fulfilled, and how to get to that place of deep joy in the everyday life, right?
Yeah, and the reason, again, you guys, we've been listening to you. When you leave us reviews and ask us questions and tell us what you want us to talk about, we do.
Yeah, and today,
this was your request.
This was your request.
I mean, so many of our amazing women that listen to the podcast are really struggling right now with discontentment and struggling with feeling unfulfilled.
And a lot of things we talk about in this podcast are ways to physically make your life better, but you will never, even if you have all of those things in place and right and you're doing everything, you can still feel discontent with what your everyday looks like.
Yes, and can we just relieve everybody and say this is something we all struggle with from time to time, right? We all do. Emmy was telling me, girls at her age, that this is something that they really struggle with too.
Well, yeah, it's really hard, especially when you're transitioning from having your life be kind of prepared for you if you went to college, going into the world and making your own decisions and figuring out what you want your life to look like for yourself can really put you in a spot where you're like, okay, well, I don't like anything, or I don't know what to choose, and everything sounds good or everything sounds bad or whatever it is. And yeah, it's easy to really not have perspective and to feel like everything in your life is not going according to plan.
Yes, and when you say that, it is so much a matter of perspective. We had an incredible visit yesterday from my mother.
I can tend to be especially on these filming days, we have a lot to get to, and we're here for 2 days, and we've got a lot to do in those 2 days, and I can tend to be a little stressed out about
being
Mom
on
is
time.
A little bit more
I'm loosey-goosey.
She's a little loosey-goosey.
I'm always wanting to go play pickleball or do something else
myself. Yeah. But anyway, my granny, literally, if you know me, you know my granny is my favorite person in the whole world.
With her.
And she showed up to our house yesterday, unannounced.
From Key West. Fresh from Key West
with her beautiful tan.
Beautiful tan.
And she's just walking in so confidently and sassy, and we were about to film, and we ended up talking to her for 2 hours. And we did end up filming after that, but my gosh,
did we hear some stories.
Now, I actually want to preface this before I get into some of the things she told us yesterday.
Yeah.
Whenever I was 16 years old, and I think this is why me and Granny have such a bond. I hate to say it, I'm not shaming any of my cousins or siblings, but I do believe that Granny does have a special place in her heart for me. And she took me when I was 16 years old to this Mexican restaurant in our town, and I did not ask her to do this, but she completely spilled the tea on my whole family.
Emmy came back I
don't even know if I told you.
You didn't tell me right away, but I remember when you finally told me, you're like, Mom.
By the way, I know so much.
By the
more
way,
than you think.
I know everything about everything in our family.
And so ever since then, me and Granny, we just have this mutual respect because she just tells me everything.
And I will have to say this, one of my favorite things my whole life has been when I get a chance to just sit down and chat with Granny. She's so fun to chat
I know.
with.
And yesterday, like I said, I was like, we have to film at this time. But then Granny shows up, and you can't help but just, like, you're getting fed so much gold. And
it's like the literal family jewels.
Yeah.
Except the opposite of jewels.
It's not really jewels, but
the family gossip, the family stories.
The family tea. But she was just telling us all these stories about her growing up and having you and having Aunt Gina and what it was like to be together with your daddy. Yes. And the, like, honest truth, no filter. Literally,
she did a lot of cursing.
A lot of cussing.
It's so funny because she would kind of go quiet, but not during the cursing part.
No, yeah, she would go. She would bleep out the wrong parts. And
she would self-bleep, but not the right parts.
But to be serious, like, I won't go into all the details because there's literally so many. We would have to literally sit here for 2 hours. And my friend Katie got to be a witness to all of it. So sorry. Like, I hope you're not scarred. But she was talking, and, you know, this was probably the, like, 70s-ish when the kind of a lot of this was happening. And for me, that's pretty far removed from the life that I currently live. Like, It's very different. And the things that she went through, you're hearing her literally talk about these times of her life where all she has is herself, and she really had to fight to get to the point that she's at now.
And when we say fight, we do mean
literally throwing hands.
Or soup cans. Or knives. Butcher knives. There was a butcher knife story that she actually used on my daddy.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear her talk about this because she really has such a light-hearted way, whereas she really could not. Like, she could look at that, and it's kind of the same thing I was saying about the way that you view your daddy and how I've always known him to be.
Yeah.
Like, having this contentment about what her life was like, and how it got her to where and her kids to where they are now.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my life, like, without perspective, things that are not that hard and, you know,
or that important
seem a lot more important than they are.
But that's too for all of us.
And it is, and it doesn't discredit anything that I have gone through or go through. But when you have that perspective of a family member who has really, you know, suffered and gone through a lot of stuff, and has remained a respectable, strong woman through it all, it allows you to have that perspective, and it just kind of propelled this conversation that we were having about our everyday life and how we can feel content with whatever we're going through.
Yeah.
And so, I just wanted to add that in there because...
Yeah, it was definitely a good perspective shift because, to be honest, even though I had a crazy childhood, I don't hardly ever think about it, you know, and my life now is so incredible. It literally does feel like a dream come true. But here's what I will say. There was a time 10 years ago, whenever I started really struggling, probably after the fire, I couldn't quite get over the fire in a way, like really struggling with anxiety, struggling with just a lot of like health issues, but mental and emotional things. And back then, if you look at my actual life, I had pretty much everything I have now, but I was not content and I was not fulfilled and I was kind of miserable. And what I watched over the years as I learned how to create contentment and create fulfillment and create purpose and create meaning was, it actually doesn't matter as much like what your actual circumstances are, because those are always going to be changing. There's sometimes where it's going to be a lot harder than others. There's sometimes life is going to bring things your way that feel impossible, like a lot of the situations Granny was in.
You know, it makes me think too, because a lot of what we talked about was the fire.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was 10 or 11 when our house burned down.
Yeah.
And I really don't have a lot of like trauma. I mean, definitely deep down, and things that I'm sure, always have a little bit of.
Yeah.
But for the most part, and we'll talk about this in relationships too, like how that can really help your contentment and fulfillment in life. But when I think back to that time of the fire, like, I don't remember it being so bad.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy to say, but I think because we were surrounded by so much love,
people taking care of everything. Granny actually reminded us. She moved in with us, and
she
Emme
literally moved in with us, and I didn't even
remember
because, and you pointed this out, like, she was
just in the background.
Like, it wasn't about her.
Yeah.
She always just took care of us at that time. And yeah, all of these things when you don't have the perspective, how lucky was I as a kid to be so shielded from the reality of what that meant for you and our family and all the stress. Like, all I was annoyed that we had to go to Knoxville, like, all the time to get new stuff. Like, you know, it's just when your perspective shifts on stuff like that. It's really cool how you can change the way you view stuff.
And how, you know, we do so often, I think, associate feeling content or feeling fulfilled with times in our life when everything's going great and all the circumstances are perfect and everything's good in your relationship. But really, I think the true skill is, can you cultivate that in your life when those things aren't there?
Yeah.
You know, and when it's not necessarily going your way, and learning how much control you have over.
And I think
that.
A lot of people do struggle with that, and I've felt that too. It's like, why do I not feel like a love and joy and zest for life when I know it's like, everything in my life is fine, good and perfect. Like, I have these things.
Yeah.
I have a job. I have a good family, or whatever it is for the certain person. I've talked about this with my friends before. It's like, I know that I have everything that I need.
Right.
So why do I still feel like
and
it's not enough?
Right. And a lot of times in that case, what I find is the clients that I help in Life Mentoring School, we make ourselves so wrong for that. Like, we wake up one day, a lot of women like my age will wake up one day and go, they have everything kind of that they always dreamed of, the house, the marriage, you know, or whatever. They wake up one day and go, so is this all there is?
Yeah. Why do I still feel
empty?
Feel this
way?
Why do I still feel?
And, you know, I think really learning to just embrace that. That's what it means to be human. Our brains are always looking for what's wrong. Our brains are always kind of searching the environment for not what's going great, but what's going bad. And we always, I think God created us with this sort of always wanting to create more, grow. And so in a sense, he created us that way. But then when we end up feeling that way, we make ourselves wrong for it. We feel guilty about it. We're afraid to say it because in our minds, like you just said, we know we are so blessed and we have everything we need, but we haven't learned to connect that, you know, to the way we feel on the inside. Yeah. And so just good news and relief for everybody out there. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It means you're a human and this is the way you were created. And I hope we can give you some practical strategies today to really connect with what you know in your head with how you're actually experiencing your life, so that you don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, is there something wrong with me? Am I just so ungrateful? Or I'm so stuck in a rut or whatever. And, so I think we have some fun stuff to share. But if that is how you find yourself at whatever phase of life you're in,
don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up, because, you know, part of this is just how you were created. And I think what we're going to talk about in a little bit is, I think the connection piece is really important. We just so easily disconnect from ourselves. We so easily disconnect from other people, disconnect from God and, you know, his ultimate high purpose for our lives. And
wouldn't you say, like, your body does that disconnection to protect you?
Yeah, it's like a protective mechanism. Yeah, for sure. But it's just so common. It's such a common thing for us to think and struggle with. And I would say one of the most common things that people who come into my program who are seeking life coaching, who are seeking some help, say, and they feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just us at our age, but I think it's at every age.
Oh, it's definitely true for my age as well.
Yeah.
Because
you were saying too, like earlier about that with your age, is that, talk to me about that, Em, because you were saying, like, I said, oh, is it the social media? Like, you guys are on social media more, so you're seeing people doing, living their Instagram life, and are you comparing? Is that what it is?
The big cliche is that, and it's a cliche because, I mean, it is partly true, but is that, oh, because you're so exposed to what other people are doing in their life, which is true. Yeah, that does make you discontent in probably what you have in some ways. But for me, what ends up happening is this like cycle of feeling discontent already. Maybe it's from that, maybe it's from real life people. Like, I think that is able to happen with or without social media. Yeah, you're way more like attuned to what other people are doing. But when I feel like that, what I go to is this isolation and scrolling. And when you're just, it's not, maybe it makes it worse that people are like doing all these things, but then you're just numbing yourself. And I deleted TikTok the other day because I found myself doing this. Like,
oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Because TikTok is so easy to get locked in because they're so short.
Yeah. And
because, yes, you're looking at other people's lives, it can make you discontent. But I think where the discontentment stems from, for me, is this, like, guilt of, oh, my gosh, I just wasted an hour of my life scrolling. I didn't get what I needed to get done. And then that shame and guilt propels you to keep doing that almost.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more where it stems from for me. I've kind of gotten to the point where, I can see through a facade of someone else's reality that they show through their social media. Like, once you become aware, you just know that that's not their reality.
Right.
That is only a portion of what they are going through every day and what they're struggling with. Yeah. But it's more the trap that when you already feel
because you're not actually then living your life.
Yeah, I'm sitting and I'm scrolling and I can't do anything about it.
Right.
Because actually, and this is another point of it that we were talking about, and sorry if I'm jumping into one of the points.
No, that's great.
During this challenge, we keep bringing up this challenge, but it has brought to light a lot of things that, when you are feeling discontent, you put off. But when you're faced with those being healthy and all these things, it kind of shows what you were doing to, gloss over things in your life. But when you feel really good, you get up and you do things. And when you get up and you do things, you get more done. You have more of a sense of fulfillment. You feel content at the end of the day because,
like, oh, I'm proud of that day I just lived.
I'm proud. I feel good.
Yeah.
And so when you don't struggle as much with comparison. You don't struggle as much with contentment because you created that for yourself.
Yeah, and I think, too, because you guys, like you mentioned, being in a transition from, like, college to, being out on your own, women my age are usually in a transition of, I've been spending all this time raising kids, and now my kids are leaving, so now what? And I think that we can be dismissive of that and not realize what a monumental change all of that is.
Yes.
The expectation that you thought, like, what you thought your life was going to look like. Maybe when you got out of college, you thought you'd have everything figured out, or you thought you'd
exactly that, like, the anticipation of something.
Yeah.
They say is always way
better than the
thing.
Yeah.
And that keeps happening. I think that's why it's so relatable to your age too, because that doesn't stop happening once you hit any milestone.
Right. And that's why I think it's really important to cultivate the skills of knowing how do you create contentment. Is contentment something that just happens to me because my life circumstances line up in a way that were with what I expected? No. And if you don't learn how to cultivate it, then you'll keep coming up against it. You'll keep finding yourself at a place where you're like, I just, where your expectations are unmet, or where you're in some kind of identity crisis and you thought things were going to be so much different at this phase than they are, that kind of always puts you at like being the victim to yourself or being the victim to your life, instead of realizing like, no, there's always a way that you can create what you really want to create, the mindset, the contentment, the gratitude, the joy. You're so much in charge of that.
Yeah, it is so interesting, and we've talked about this because I did those interviews.
Yeah.
And I figured...
By the way, thank you, dear ones, who filled out the forms.
Who did the form.
Who did the interviews. We love you. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll kind of make that more of a... regular thing.
Yeah.
So we can stay on the know.
Yeah.
But I was really interested to see the results, but I kind of figured that I wouldn't really relate because, and this is a theme throughout being a part of your program in different ways.
Yeah.
But you always have, especially I'm 23, and my life looks pretty different than those people I was interviewing. Mostly moms, mostly over 40, mostly in their job, have been in their job for a long time. But what was so interesting, a lot of them had similar, like, it is just at the heart of it, discontentment with where they're at, their money, their kids, whatever it is.
Yep.
But when we were actually got to the roots of the conversation, like, I related to
like,
what they were feeling.
I feel
so
that way
much.
too. Yeah.
Which is part of the reason we have this podcast anyway, because
Yes,
we are so much more similar than you think. And
Yes.
having these conversations, it helps you feel better about where you're at. But it was just interesting, like, we struggled with the same feelings at the end of the day.
Yes.
And it really does stem from not feeling like where you're at right now
Yes.
is enough for you
Yeah.
to have joy and
Yes.
for you to be happy and content.
So true. And I think, and we'll kind of dive into what I think will be some sort of practical strategies for helping create more contentment and fulfillment. But this is like practice. It takes practice to do this because, again, your mind, your brain is just wired to find the negativity, to find what's wrong, to find discontent. And when you realize that, you can sort of separate that from you. It's not necessarily that you are discontent. It's that, my brain keeps finding ways to make me feel discontented or unfulfilled or unsatisfied. And then I can choose how I want to respond to that. And I think really the first thing that can help so much is just a lot of compassion for yourself. Of course, you feel this way. I love that statement because so often we don't validate our feelings. We just make ourselves wrong for it. And I love telling myself, and I love helping my clients say to themselves, of course I feel this way. Of course I'm angry. Of course I feel discontent. And then there's just like a little bit of relief in your soul when you just acknowledge yourself. When you stop going, well, I shouldn't feel this way, but I do.
Yeah. And you stop searching for other people to make you feel that way as well. Like, make you feel right for feeling. Because I think a lot of times it's like you want your friend to be like, well, you can feel like you want your friend or someone else to validate
you, but you haven't validated you.
You're right.
And so like practicing a lot of acceptance and self-compassion, like, interesting that, my brain keeps wanting to create this. Of course, that makes sense. I like to say that to myself a lot too. Like, that makes sense that this season feels really hard. That makes sense that this transition is really hard.
Instead of being like, I have no reason.
Yes, because that's what we say to ourselves. Well, I have everything on paper. I have no reason to feel this way. No, we have to validate ourselves. We have to say, like, no, of course.
You have a lot going on. You have every reason to feel that
and
way.
like, I really do believe that, and I've done a series on the podcast about emotions, and I really do believe that learning how to allow and navigate and manage and create our emotions is just one of the most powerful life skills. But really the first step of that is accepting where you are and accepting the emotional state that you're in right now and really understanding it, validating it for yourself. Like, oh, of course you feel this way. Oh, that totally makes sense. And especially when we're in these big transitions that feel hard, that we've never navigated before, like, give yourself a little credit. Acknowledge yourself. Like, this is such a huge gift to give yourself. And when you give it to yourself, you'll stop demanding that other people give it to you, right?
Yes.
Like, really what you're asking is for yourself to validate you. So, huge first step.
That's a great one.
And then the other thing that I like to really practice after that is deciding on purpose. How do I want to approach this? How do I want to think about this? What perspective? Granny helped us with this yesterday. What perspective do I want to bring to this? So I've acknowledged myself. I've said, of course you feel this way. I've said, this makes perfect sense. And now what?
Yes.
And this is my favorite part, you guys, because you literally can create anything you want. And if you want to feel more purposeful, you literally create purpose with your brain. You do things in a way that feels purposeful. You tell yourself, I love my purposeful, fulfilling, contented life. I love the life I'm creating for myself, because what that will create for you is a life that feels more contented and more fulfilled. So you want to feel that way, then think thoughts that have you living your life in a way that literally is more fulfilling.
Yes.
And I think it's so powerful to do that, and most people don't. Most people are assuming you got to wait for your circumstances to line up just right. They're never going to do that. This is something that you can have control of, that you can control the narrative, that you can decide how you want to approach your life and what you want to think about it. And, you know, yesterday when we were talking to Granny about it, it's so funny because even when she brings up really hard things, like she told us some crazy
I was shocked, honestly, like that she was, the way she was saying it.
The way
too.
she was saying it, just like matter of fact.
Casual.
And it's so interesting to me because what that tells me, and the fact that I could receive it, like I was thoroughly enjoying.
Yes.
Like hanging on every word, enjoying every story. And I think what that tells me is that I've done the work.
Yes.
To decide what my past means, to make peace with it, to create contentment around it.
Yeah. And she's not validating that what happened was good.
Was good. Yeah.
But also she's not a victim to what happened to
right.
her. And she doesn't make you feel like she needs to be either.
No.
You can laugh at the stories.
Yeah.
You can join her.
Yes.
Because
we were hanging on everywhere. We were like, tell us more.
No,
what else?
yeah.
What else you got?
Yeah, when you actually look at the content of the stories and think about that's her real life that she lived and she made it out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gives you this perspective of if she can live her life like she does now with so much joy in her own way. And
and you know, she was always like that, and I think I just owe a lot to her. I often say that Granny was my first life coach. Like, she has that energy about her that she just loves and accepts you the way you are. I always felt like growing up I could tell her anything and she'd be like, we'll figure it out, it'll be okay. Like, she just had that sort of very loving, nurturing, positive mindset about everything. And I'm so thankful. It was like the water I swam in growing up. So it wasn't a stretch for me to like learn how to do the work that I do now to help people cultivate mental and emotional resilience, because I lived with someone who could do that sometimes in the hardest of circumstances. Yeah. And as she was sharing that yesterday, I'm like, oh, I got the reframing from her. Oh, I learned how to create contentment and fulfillment by watching someone do it whose circumstances almost never were right.
Never were in her favor.
Yeah.
You know, almost always were trying for her.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was super, and it just empowers you because, you know, you're like, that might not have been my life, but that's where I came from.
Yeah. I come from good stock like that. Yeah. The other thing that I think is really powerful, we talked about this earlier too, which is to create, you know, realistic, motivating goals for yourself so that you give yourself something to work toward, something to make progress toward, something to learn, something like love doing this. And I know that there are plenty of people who are like so resistant to like, I just hate setting goals. Yeah, well, maybe you haven't learned how to do it in a nourishing way.
Something
that's inspiring.
Really helped me is the more specific I can be.
Yeah.
Because when you kind of do like a general goal, it's way easier to not think about it or not do it.
Yeah.
And with the way you set up, like going for a goal,
a 90-day goal
or a span of time or 30 days, whatever it is, the more specific you can make it, it really frees up what you do too, because you can really make anything a specific goal.
Yes.
Like, it makes it way more manageable, and it holds you accountable in a way if it's so specific. I don't know. I think that helps me when it's a little bit more written out in a way that I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do to get there.
And it's the process of that that's so important, you know, like the process of what you're doing more than what you get at the end of it, because then you learn how to really enjoy the process of something that feels like a challenge. And you know how you feel when you go to bed at night and you've done some hard things and you've shown up for yourself and you've done what you said you're going to do. You go to bed going, man, that was a good day. I feel so fulfilled from that.
You feel joy. You feel content.
Yeah. And I think we so often, you maybe are not at the age of this yet, but you know how like as you're growing up, there's always the next milestone, the next thing I have to do. It's like, there's like built-in goals.
Yes.
But when you get to my age, there's no built-in goals. Like nobody's telling you.
No one
like,
tells you what to do after you're
and you're getting to the age where it's kind of like, okay. And I think we come to that age and we just often stop growing and stop reaching for things. But our souls are actually designed to keep doing that. So then if you're not doing that, you feel a little stale, a little stuck, a little discontent, a little like, oh, what's my life about then? So if you're feeling that way, I highly encourage you to take on a new challenge, to set an intention, to set a goal, to learn something new, like keep yourself growing so that you have something that you're learning how to be good at, that you're learning how to be more disciplined at. You know, we talk about it all the time, but the habits that you have in your life become your life.
It's so interesting too, because I think back to the time of my life where I felt like the most discontent. And I really think what happens is, and it all builds on each other, because now I'm just like, it got me thinking, well, when I was so discontent, you know, I isolated myself a lot, so I didn't have relationships that really I could talk to. But part of the reason that you don't feel like you have things to talk about is because you're not doing things.
Yeah.
And now it's like when you are constantly learning new things, constantly, like, whether it's like, for instance, pickleball.
Right.
Like, I always have something to tell someone about.
Yep.
Now. And that cultivates
relationships and connection. Which is actually our next point.
Yes.
So let's move on to that one.
But, yeah, it's just interesting. Like, I used to feel so, like, down on myself because I'm like, I feel like I'm not interesting. And I feel like I don't interest people.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, because...
And you know what that really means is I'm not interested in me. I'm not interested in my life.
Which is true, because you're not... You know,
because you're not creating an interesting life.
You're not doing anything
yeah.
that you feel proud of.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit and tell people about the 50, I mean, and this is not always bad, but like, okay, let's say I just watched 2 hours of TikTok. Like, it's way less interesting to try to tell someone about that.
Right.
Whereas, oh my gosh, I played 2 hours of pickleball. You know, like, that's more interesting.
Or, oh, I'm doing this metabolism
and you
challenge.
feel better about that.
Yes.
And yeah, that just clicked in my head. Like, I felt so isolated because I felt uninteresting to myself. And
yes. And so
I didn't want to share
yourself.
that with other people. I didn't want to share that part of myself with other people.
Yeah. And it's funny, too. We were just talking about this today. Like, when you guys come, it feels like the time goes by so fast.
No, literally.
We have so much to talk about. So it just feels like, oh, I just wish we had another day, or I wish we had more time. And I think part of that is because we're doing interesting things and we're challenging ourselves both individually in our own individual lives, right? But then also, doing some things together. And I think that connection that you cultivate with other people gives so much meaning to your life. And I think we have gotten into our culture where we just isolate ourselves for whatever reason. Like you're saying, maybe it's because we're not living a life that we love, that we're proud of or whatever. But that connection is so powerful. The connection that you have to yourself, the connection that you have to God, and the perspective of, oh, he's given me this one amazing wild life, and how do I want to show up to it? And how do I want to think about it? And do I want to make it inspiring for myself? Do I want to make it interesting to me?
Yeah.
And so that it serves other people. And I think, I've been guilty of doing that. I actually have been thinking about I should get out more in my town. Like I just don't get out as much in town. And I went to like a luncheon last week and I saw all these people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I thought to myself,
I need to do this more.
I need to do this more often because I do have a lot to offer and a lot to learn from other people and being interested in them. And I just think for all of us, it's been so easy after COVID to get in patterns of more isolation. So it's definitely something that I feel inspired.
Well, yeah. And when you are forced, like, we have Bible study at our house every week, and most weeks, if I'm being honest, it rolls around and it's like,
we gotta have everybody.
It's just like, it's overwhelming to think about you have to talk to all these people, and I love it.
Yeah.
And what happens is every time afterward, I'm like, that was the best.
Good. Yeah.
I love those people.
Yeah.
I wish I could talk to them more.
Yeah.
And it would be a lot easier before if it like canceled or something. Well, then the next week it rolls around and then you really don't want to do it.
Right.
And that was like when I was in a sorority. The saying in our sorority every time, because people would just, you're in college and the girls just like sometimes don't want to show up to things. And we would always say like, you only get out of this, what you put in.
Yeah.
And every time I would not want to go to a meeting, and then I would go, and then after I would feel the same
You're like,
way.
oh, that was so good.
That was so good.
Yeah.
And it's just funny because you talk to other people and it gets you out of the rut. I was even talking to you. It's like, even with work. Well, if we haven't had a meeting in a week.
You and I, right.
Me and you.
Yeah.
I feel really unmotivated and things feel a lot more hard to tackle. But the second we get off a meeting,
you're like so motivated.
I'm motivated.
Let's go.
It feels good. I haven't been isolating. Like, it's easy to isolate
when you work
in
from home.
Small ways when you work from home.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, like it's really hard to give yourself self-motivation all of the time.
Yeah.
And so connection in every part of your life. Like, I can just think of so many things that feel so like such a heavy weight before you do it.
Yeah.
But then after you feel inspired, motivated. I talk to my friends at Bible study. I'm like, I want to do this tomorrow. Yeah. Because Emma talked about that. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it would be a lot easier to not be around people.
So true. Yeah. And I think the last thing that I wanted to mention for this that feels really practical is you want to have a more contented, fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful, joyful life. Do things on purpose that are meaningful, joyful, fulfilling, that bring contentment. Like, take action. Ask yourself when you look at your day that I highly recommend you're planning your day. When you look at the day you have planned out, do I have things on there that make me feel fulfilled? Can I do it with more fulfillment? Can I do it with more meaning? Can I do those things with more purpose? Can I do it with more joy? Like, that is something that you create. And as you take action in your life, you're the one creating it or not creating it. And so I just think that this is such a powerful, like, perspective shift for a lot of people, that it doesn't mean that things in your life are lining up just right to create contentment. It means you're choosing contentment in every situation. You're choosing meaning in what you're doing. You're choosing purpose. You're choosing fulfillment in the way you're living your life. And then when you get to the end of that day, you're like, that was Such a good day.
And the beautiful thing that happens when you do that for yourself is inevitably other people feel that change and shift in you.
Yep.
And they want the same things.
Yes.
And I have just seen that happen like tenfold in my life. Thank God for my friends.
Yep.
Because they chase after those fulfilling
yes
and joyful things, and we just push each other. And it is such like when you see it seeping out in someone else, and luckily like you have always been a person that it seeps out of. Like people ask me all the time, like, what is your mom drinking that she is like how does she do everything? But you are so intentional about your days and your time, and it seeps in, it draws people in, people want to know.
Yeah.
And you can do that for other people. Like it changes your aura, it changes who you are, it changes what you give off into the world.
So true. And which in turn changes what you get back too.
Yes.
So that's so good. Well, that was really fun to chat
was a
about,
fun
Miss
one.
M. Let's do our top 3 really quick, our favorite 3, because we do have to go get Tommy Boy.
It is 3:00, and he's going to be so
gonna be
mad
at us. We're going to be a little bit
so
late.
Mad. That's
but
okay.
We love you guys. We're going to give you some top 3s.
It's worth it.
Fave 3s.
We should film his reaction to getting in the car just so we can show the people.
Yes, we should.
If we get it, we'll show you.
Yes.
But speaking of Tom, actually,
is he number 1 on your list?
I only have 2 things on my list. I'm so sorry.
Oh, great.
But one of my favorite things is coming home, picking Tom up from school, and hearing about his 7 girlfriends, friends that are girls, and how we should rank them.
He does love to know the order that you like them in best.
Yes, and he really is very open and honest about every friend that he has, and he's very detailed.
Yes.
And he's 11 and he has got a plan and he's ready and he wants to know your opinion.
Yes, he does.
And he'll ask you 17 times what you think.
Yep.
And it's just the best.
It's the best.
It's so pure and it's so innocent, and
he's kind of like a grumpy old man. Like he asks it in a little bit of a grumpy way, but then when he starts talking about it, he just grins
loves it.
Loves it.
Yeah, so that's brought me just
so much joy.
So much joy. I'm so exposing you this week. I'm so sorry.
Emily, you've been exposing me in every top 3. Go ahead. That's fine.
My second favorite thing is the eyelashes scattered around every part of this house. We were on the porch yesterday.
There are a lot of eyelashes.
And I literally almost had a heart attack because I was like, oh my gosh, the biggest spider is on the ground. And it was literally just my mom's eyelash pair. Just it's seriously ridiculous where they're at. What? In what world did she take her eyelashes off right here?
Right here. Because don't you, if you're wearing strip lashes, don't you get to the point where you're like, that's it. It has to come off right now.
I just don't understand. They never make it into a trash can. They're just...
Eventually, no, I reuse them. So I usually...
off the patio floor.
Them. Maybe not off the patio floor, but I reuse them. So that brings me to number 1 on my list. I think I only have 2 as well, but number 1 on my list are my strip lashes.
Okay.
You guys, these are intense. These are not the ones that I wear all the time.
These are intense.
I usually, when I'm wearing glasses a lot, I wear the intense ones because otherwise you can't really see. So that's fine. But, the ones that I love so much are Christina 42s that you can get from Amazon. Human hair lashes, literally light as a feather. Again, not these. Christina 42. Human hair, does that make you not... Are you unwell, Katie? And Emmy, you look weird too.
I mean, just the way that you said human hair. Lashes.
Okay, well, anyways, I don't know who's donating these.
Oh.
But they're light as a feather.
Who is Christina? And Where are her lashes? I'm so sorry to Christina.
Where are her lashes? Oh my gosh, this cracks me up so much. So we will link to the Christinas.
But seriously.
But seriously, they're the best lashes. I've been using them for literal years. I probably could be a little better about where I take them off.
All around the world are living without their eyelashes so that mom can...
There's 42 Christina.
Just stop it. So that's my favorite. Okay, second thing is my second thing. I think this is I'm just gonna end it with this. I just ordered 2 rubber trees. Like rubber trees are a plant that in the form of a tree. I just ordered 2 off Amazon. I just bought a new tree that I'm looking at right now that you can't see. I just bought an indoor tree, and I am so obsessed with houseplants. But what I notice about myself is I'm obsessed with very large ones.
True.
So I just got rid of like 4 or 5 that were too little. I'm like, those are all dead to me. All I want,
give me a house tree.
Give me a house tree. Give me a house tree.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm headed with my plant life, everyone.
I love it.
In case you wondered.
I love it.
Thank you.
Anyway, anything else
there
to
you
add?
Go. That's
for
all I
this
have.
episode?
It makes me very content and fulfilled to have
Same.
giant house plants and house trees. So
it makes me content for you.
Thank you. All right, you guys, we love you so much. Thank you for joining us today. I mean, whether you want to get some Christina 42s or you want a house tree, whatever you want, we're here for you. So
we are here for you.
We love you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. It means so much. Thank you for when you share the episodes. Thank you for the reviews that you leave. Thank you for the engagement you share on the House of Joy.
It just
Instagram.
means the world.
It means the world. We love you. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.